What's new? The disaster can be attributed to three main causes. The devastating effects of the floods in the Libyan city of Derna, which have resulted in the tragic loss of nearly 6,000 lives and the disappearance of 10,000 people, can be attributed to three key factors that explain this tragedy. Hisham Chkaiwat, when describing the situation in the Libyan city of Derna, characterizes it as a scene of desolation and ruin. The Minister of Civil Aviation and a member of the Emergency Committee reported that the scene is heart-wrenching, with visible corpses everywhere, from the sea to the valleys and under the buildings. After assessing the havoc in this northwestern city of the country, Chkaiwat points out that approximately 25% of the locality has been engulfed by the waters, and few buildings are still standing. Last Monday, the number of missing persons rose to around 10,000, and it is estimated that nearly 6,000 lost their lives due to the floods caused by the Daniel storm, according to data from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. The heavy rains turned the streets into actual rivers, and this situation was aggravated by the collapse of two dams that released 33 million cubic meters of water into the city. Rescue teams are doing their utmost to assist the victims, but the difficulty of accessing the affected area has forced both rescue teams and citizens to rescue the numerous victims trapped under the rubble using everyday tools and bury them in mass graves in the Martuba Cemetery, located about 20 kilometers from Derna. Meanwhile, the residents of Derna are desperately searching for their missing loved ones. On social media, there is constant posting of information about identified victims, as well as phone numbers of people who may have information about survivors who have not yet found their loved ones. One of the messages shared on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, urges people to forward the post to anyone in the area, hoping that a family member of the girl found near the collapsed buildings will see it. The message also calls for widespread sharing of the post. Hours after entire neighborhoods were devastated by the floods and sea waters, Othman Abdul Jalil, the health minister of the administration that controls eastern Libya, stated that the death toll is expected to reach 10,000. The situation in the city of Derna is becoming increasingly tragic, and we still do not have definitive statistics on the number of victims, he said. While it is still premature to obtain an exact figure of victims, everything suggests that there will be a significant increase in the coming days. If most of the missing persons have indeed perished due to the floods, this would become one of the worst tragedies of its kind. How is it conceivable that rainfall in Libya has triggered such a magnitude of tragedy that will claim the lives of thousands of people? This disaster is entirely unprecedented. In the absence of precise data in humanitarian assessments, an estimation of the population in the area has been made, based on an average of 5 inhabitants per household. A humanitarian worker named Mohammed Taylaman, in his social media posts, has commented that while this figure is an approximation, we are facing an event of proportions that could be compared to the legend of Atlantis, but in the context of Libya. The available data support this claim. The Roaya Foundation for Space Sciences and Applications, based in the country, maintains that what has happened is extraordinary and unprecedented, and that precipitation values possibly have no precedent in the history of Libya's climate records. The National Meteorology Center of Libya has added that the cubic meters recorded during Monday's floods are a historical record for the region. However, despite these indicators, the country was not prepared to handle this catastrophe. Osama Ali, spokesperson for the Libyan Emergency Authority, has pointed out that there was not a proper analysis of weather conditions, sea water levels, precipitation, and wind speed. Additionally, evacuations of families that could have been in the storm's path or in flood-prone areas were not carried out. The water moved towards a region near Derna, characterized by its coastal mountainous area. According to Ali, homes located in the valleys that were in the flood's path were swept away by the strong currents of muddy water, which also carried vehicles and debris. However, information regarding alleged evacuation plans is contradictory, and it hasn't been clarified why, if requested, they were not carried out. On the other hand, the Libyan city of Derna is situated on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and at the end of a valley called Wadi, which is generally dry for most of the year. One of the reasons explaining the devastation in this area is that the Wadi turned into a funnel that concentrated the rainfall into the city center. This phenomenon, coupled with the destruction of the two dams, resulted in the catastrophic flooding that submerged the city underwater. The lack of trained personnel and rescue equipment is evident. The meteorological catastrophe has occurred amid the prolonged political instability that Libya has experienced since the overthrow and assassination of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Since then, the country has been divided into two factions: an internationally recognized interim government based in the capital, Tripoli, and another in Tobruk in the east of the country. This complicated political context is hindering rescue operations due to the inability of different authorities to respond quickly and effectively. As Libyan journalist Abdulkader Assad highlighted in an interview with the BBC, the shortage of equipment and trained rescuers in Libya is evident, as the primary focus for the past 12 years has been on armed conflict. Despite the efforts of the government based in Tripoli, which has sent an airplane with 14 tons of medical supplies, body bags, and over 80 doctors and paramedics, Assad warns that many of the promised government aids are not reaching the affected areas. Several countries have offered assistance to handle the crisis situation as rescue teams continue to search for survivors under the rubble. Turkey has dispatched multiple planes loaded with humanitarian aid, and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced the sending of 168 search and rescue teams along with humanitarian assistance to Benghazi. On the other hand, the President of the United Arab Emirates, Zayed Al Nahyan, has ordered assistance to be sent, and the U.S. Embassy in Libya has stated that it is in contact with local authorities and the United Nations to determine the most urgently needed assistance. Following the collapse of the two dams, an investigation arose that raised concerns about the need for their reconstruction. In 2022, a report from the University of Cebu warned that in the event of a large-scale flood, one of the two dams would likely collapse, posing a high risk of flooding to the valley residents and the city of Derna. A fragile infrastructure. Years of political instability have resulted in a decrease in investment in roads and public services, as well as minimal regulation of private construction. The havoc caused by the meteorological phenomenon Daniel occurred days after a magnitude 7.2 earthquake in Morocco, which resulted in thousands of deaths and extensive damage in cities like Marrakesh. Infrastructure has also been a factor that has worsened the situation in the country after the earthquake. Many of the buildings in Marrakesh are highly vulnerable to earthquakes due to their historical nature. Furthermore, in Morocco, it is common for buildings to be constructed without a defined architectural plan, leading to poorly designed high-rise constructions. As pointed out by José Carlos Salcedo, a professor of structures at the University of Extremadura, a building may have 4 floors, and someone buys the terrace and adds a 5th floor. High-rise construction is carried out without proper design or planning, and lacks control. Furthermore, many of the new constructions lack earthquake-resistant pillars, even in areas that are not considered to have a high seismic risk. The absence of earthquake-resistant buildings is even more apparent in places that do not typically experience significant earthquakes. The images of Derna reveal widespread destruction, and the spokesperson for the Libyan National Army, Ahmed al-Masmari, emphasizes that the situation has been completely unexpected. "It's the first time we've faced something of this magnitude," he declared, highlighting that the last major natural disaster to affect Libya was an earthquake 60 years ago. Amidst this devastation, the consequences are still impossible to calculate. Al-Masmari lamented the situation, saying, "The citizens who evacuated Derna and the affected areas practically left with nothing, as if they had started anew from scratch. They have lost all their possessions. Some have lost their loved ones, and some have suffered the loss of part of their families." Comment on what you thought about the news, give the video a like, and subscribe to the channel. If you think it's necessary, you can also share this video on your social media.